welcome to today's episode of Your Vibe Tribe podcast and the first episode of my series, Philosophy for the Girls. Before we dive into today's conversation, I wanted to take a moment to just say thank you to anyone that listens and supports this podcast. It really does mean the absolute world to me. Every single time that you click into an episode and you listen, it really helps this platform and community grow even more. Now, if you've been enjoying the content and the advice that we've been giving you, then please take a moment to share this episode and share your Vibe Tribe podcast with your friends, your family, and your network. It literally takes 2 seconds. So hit the share button wherever you are listening to this podcast. Share it to your socials, TikTok, Instagram, and don't forget to tag at Your Vibe Tribe podcast so that we can personally thank you for sharing. And for those of you who haven't already, make sure to hit that follow and subscribe button. That way you are always updated when a new episode launches. Our Vibe Tribe is growing and it's all thanks to you. So let's keep it going and let's get started with today's episode. On today's episode, we are getting started with our new series, Philosophy for the Girls. Don't worry, I'm taking out all the silly jargon that makes these concepts go from boring to actually super helpful advice that you can implement into your daily life, elevate your mindset, and to broaden your perspective on life. These concepts are also going to be really great to either challenge your own beliefs, either further cementing the current beliefs you hold or creating new ones. Today, we're focusing on Stoicism. Stoicism was created by Zeno, a philosopher that was going to embark on a very long voyage to another city. On his journey to this new city, his ship, along with all of his belongings, the cargo on the ship, everything sank. He then ended up in Athens with absolutely nothing to his name. Can you imagine going on a trip, trying to find solace in exploring a new location or embarking on a new adventure, and then in the middle of your journey, you lose everything? I'm sure many of us would also have an existential crisis and would probably absolutely lose it. I mean, could you imagine losing absolutely everything that you own? So with nothing to his name, Zeno ended up in Athens. He then started studying different philosophies of that time, including Socrates and other really popular philosophical beliefs. The journey of losing all of his personal belongings, along with the new acquired beliefs that he'd be learning in Athens, he completely changed the course of his life. This new way of thinking for Zeno ended up creating the principles that we know today as Stoicism. When I first found out about Stoicism, it came at a perfect time for me where I desperately needed to detach from these super chaotic and tumultuous emotions that I had going on in my life. There was a lot of ups and downs and fluctuations, and those ups and downs of emotion is something that I've dealt with a lot in my life. It is a consistent theme and something that I've always battled in life. And when I first learned about Stoicism, I was at a point in my life where I really desperately needed to get a hold of these erratic emotions because it was affecting my productivity, it was affecting my mindset, and it was affecting the long-term goals that I wanted in both my relationship, my career, my aspirations. My overall well-being was affected by these emotions. And I realized that my mindset and outlook on life were the root cause of a lot of my distress and unhappiness. So these principles I've incorporated into my thought process, into my logic. A lot of these principles that I'm going to mention have acted almost as a defense against these irrational emotions that we sometimes, and I think many women, struggle with. And it's a lot of those irrational emotions that, if we can't control them, can consume us. Now, before we get into these principles, I will just make one disclaimer. These principles are not the end all be all. These principles are guidelines, they're suggestions, they're tips that you can decide whether or not you want to implement into your life. Just like any philosophy or way of thinking, it can be challenged. These principles are not the only way that you can change or improve your life, but they can provide you with options and alternatives for those that want to seek new ways of life and alternative better ways to live. Okay, so let's get into it. Here are the 9 principles of Stoicism. Number 1, if you want a smooth flow to life, live according to nature. Zeno believed that we all have an inner purpose. He called it the inner genius. And this inner purpose is what connects us to nature. So, those that live by keeping the individual and nature in harmony will be happy. That principle I hold very dear because for a large part of my life, I lived very consumed by things that were not in line with who I was to the core, to my inner purpose, to my inner individual. And to be honest, I probably didn't even really know what my purpose was. I lived very day to day, and I let a lot of materialistic goals dictate what I was doing in life. And it wasn't necessarily in line with who I was and my virtues as a person. I see that dilemma a lot, particularly not just in women, but in men as well. But specifically to women, I think that we can get very caught up in a lot of materialistic, vain goals that aren't necessarily in line with who we are. And so, this principle I hold very dear to me that, you need to find that deeper inner purpose outside of materialism, outside of just financial wealth, but really dig deep into who you are as an individual, what lights your soul up, what truly sparks that fulfillment in you and that happiness. And I'm telling you, when you find that one thing, you will know if that thing that you're doing is in line with your inner person, with your inner genius. Principle number 2, happiness isn't found in things, it's found in virtue alone. Stoics believe that it's all about what we value and the choices we make. In other words, a happy life can only be made through human excellence. The Stoics listed their essential virtues as wisdom, self-control, justice, and bravery. So if we put all of our value on external or materialistic things instead of virtue, so if we put all of our value on external or materialistic things, we're now separating our individual nature from the universal one that is what holds us all together. So that unalignment is what starts to cause isolation, anxiety, and a lot of other toxic emotions like anger, envy, and so on. We really need to dig deeper than just external things and materialistic pursuits when we're deciding on what to do with our lives, right? What to dedicate our time to, and really be super intentional with that. And I think a lot of women right now, because they're so caught up in, materialistic and very vain ambitions, it tends to leave you feeling very unfulfilled and very lost and filled with anxiety and a lot of emptiness. And I think the minute that we start to look deeper within ourselves, we can find that depth, and that's where we can find that fulfillment in life and that contentment and that happiness. Principle number 3, and this is a really good one, we don't control external events. So we can only control our thoughts, we can only control our opinions, we can only control our decisions and our duties. So basically, the Stoics believe that a lot of what happens is beyond our control and not up to us. So the Stoics believe that we need to remember that the only things that are up to us are how we exercise our reason and how we form opinions about the worth and truth and the decisions and actions that we take. And that is such a good principle because for a long time, I was consumed with all of these thoughts of things that were out of my control. And I listened to this issue as a recurring theme from a lot of my friends, right? They'll mention to me, like, oh my gosh, am I going to have kids? Am I going to get married? Am I going to get to my career in 10 years where I want to be? And it's like, you cannot fill up your day filled with all of these thoughts of things that we can't control. Okay. let yourself focus on the things that you have control over, right? And that includes our day-to-day actions, our day-to-day decisions. So if you're someone right now that is working towards something, why spend energy on the things that you can't control, right? I can only control if I'm accomplishing my day-to-day tasks every day, if I'm trying to learn and grow professionally and educate myself and research and practice my craft. Those are things that I can control. For example, with creating my content, I can spend time educating myself on the best practices for content creating, and I can spend time trying to learn how to create an eye-catching and visually appealing and engaging video. But when I press record, the rest is out of my hands. So why am I going to spend my time worrying about what happens after I press record? It's a waste of energy. I'm going to spend my time on the before, right? And the showing up every day, and the how much am I willing, how much effort and time I can put into learning my craft, right? But I can't control what happens after I press record. And I feel like us as women, we spend a lot of our time thinking and thinking and thinking about all of these scenarios and all of these possibilities that could potentially happen if I do this and this. It's like, why are we spending all of our energy thinking about the what if? Let's spend our energy thinking about what I can do today. Like, what is actually within my physical control, right? And that's the actions that you take every day. That's the opinions that you form. And that's the logic and reasoning that you use to make those decisions. Principle number 4, we've each been given all the inner resources we need to thrive. So Stoics believe that we were each born with the resources we need to thrive in our life's journey. So we're born with senses like reason and power of choice. And these resources are what guide us. And this is an interesting perspective, right? Because it's the idea that we all come into this world with a level playing field. I don't know how much I really believe in that statement for its entirety of what it means. Even though me as an immigrant moving from Venezuela into the US, living in a low income area for most of my childhood, instead of using that as an excuse, I can have the perspective that even though those were my circumstances, I hold in me the reason, the power of choice, just like anybody else in any other circumstance. And so it is up to my choices and it's up to my actions, right, to achieve what I want. And so it's an interesting perspective of, you know, yes, I am capable just like anybody else in this, despite any of my circumstances or the situation that I was born into. And it's tough because, lately I've been watching a lot of interesting documentaries, and listening to stories of people and groups of people that were born into these really dark and cruel environments. People today, right? There's a lot of horrible things going on in other parts of the world, and these people, it's it's somewhat sad to think that they're born into these circumstances, but I think leaning into this principle is the thought that despite those circumstances, these people have the power and the capability to overcome what they're currently experiencing. So that can be a powerful mindset, right? That you are in the mindset that I have all that I need to create the life that I want. So it's interesting, and I think it can be really useful, especially if you've ever felt like you were kind of given the short stick, right? Or the short hand. I find that perspective very, very useful. Number 5, eliminate toxic emotions. So, Stoics believe that we must neglect false beliefs and destructive emotions that arise from them to rid ourselves of anger, fear, anxiety, and envy. So, Stoics believe that hope and fear is just us letting our thoughts and beliefs project into the future, dealing with positive and negative outcomes that we do not control. They also advocated that the farther we are from anger, the stronger we will be. That is a very amazing statement. I'm going to just say it again. The Stoics advocated that the farther we are from anger, the stronger we will be. That is such an interesting concept. Traditionally, when we think of strength, we think of like brute force, right? We think of like a strong man, right? Or someone that is like aggressive. And the more that I've researched and the more that I've like dug deeper within like my own logic and my own reasoning, I've also found that the farther away I am from those just innate emotions, just like anger or rage, the better chance I have of using my logic and reasoning. And it's a better and far more effective strategy to use logic and reason than emotion to get you out of like tough situations. These dark and sometimes intense emotions can cloud our judgment. And I've dealt with this, especially working with other people in, my career. I've had a lot of situations where someone will have said something to me and it'll immediately give me this emotion, but it takes skill and practice to be able to calm that emotion, even if you have it, because I think some parts of us are a little bit genetic, right? How you react to things can be very genetic. But even though you have that initial intense emotion, maybe it's anger, maybe it's envy, maybe it's sadness, that you can recognize that emotion and then acknowledge it, but not let it dictate the action that you take. That's a strong belief that I've recently really, really, really held close to me. And it's that you can't control your first thought, but you can control the action that follows. And so I've been really trying to implement that practice into my career, into my relationship, and to just be very aware when these erratic and toxic emotions come up, because they do come up. And it's, I don't think anybody can listen to this and say, oh, I've never had a toxic emotion or a toxic thought. We've all had it. But it's realizing when it comes up, keeping it in check so that that action that follows is more in line with reason than that erratic, toxic emotion. Number 6, we are and must remain a unified self. So the Stoics believe that we can't complain or blame anyone else. So you can either work on your own reasoning or spend time trying to control things that are completely out of your control. Just in 2024, victim culture is a really big thing. We all want to play the victim. We all want to feel sorry for ourselves. And it's the fact that no. And I think it's happened to a lot. I mean, it's happened to me. It's happened to some friends that I hear, like they'll go through some really tough, some really tough life circumstances. But ultimately, like when you sit back and you think, like, how did I end up here? Like, you know how you ended up there. Like you made a lot of decisions that led you down that path. I've been there, right? Where I've kind of been like, why is this happening to me? Right? I want to play the victim. I want to feel sorry for myself, but really like our circumstances are no one to, we can't blame anyone but ourselves, right? We have to learn how to take accountability for what we experience and the situations that we end up in. This principle is really interesting because it plays into the fact that we really can't blame anyone but ourselves. And that even if you do want to blame anyone else, why are we going to spend energy and time trying to blame someone else for the situation that you're currently in when you can spend time figuring out and rationalizing how you're going to better yourself and how you're going to get out of the situation? Another big thing is Stoics advocated for worrying what's on the inside and not what's on the outside. So again, putting value on things that are more deep, right? That are within you, not external materialistic values. And I think as women, that's something that we struggle with a lot, is we put a lot of our value on what's on the outside, right? What we look like, our appearance, what we're wearing, the car that we drive. It can be really easy to compare ourselves specifically with what we look like, right? My happiness grew when I learned to displace value on the external factors, like what I look like and what I was wearing, and placed more value on how I felt and the confidence that I had, and more deeper virtuous accomplishments, like my choices, the virtues that I believed in, the people I surrounded myself with, things that are just deeper than just external factors. Number 7, no man is an island. So Stoics believe that we will suffer and fail to realize our humanity unless we are working to connect to our world with the concerns of others. So, for example, they said you're supposed to treat a friend as you would your family, and you treat your neighbor as you would your friend, and to treat a foreigner as you would your countrymen. They believed in a system of mutual collaboration. I have always had a very strong, um, almost distaste for nationalism, because as much as I do feel patriotic and proud to be an American and proud to be Venezuelan and proud of my heritage and where I come from, it's very to me it is almost very scary that because we have like such intense feelings for the people that we have and that we love and that we want to protect, that everyone else is the other person or it's them. And that really like just separates people, and it almost makes it almost loses that like humanity, right? Because you start to look at other groups of people that could have different religious beliefs, different political beliefs as the other people, and it dehumanizes that group. And so I always found that very scary and very tough topic to handle, because I also agree with this principle a lot in the sense that, you know, we are human, right? First, we are human first before we are American, before we are Black, before we are Republican. Like, we are human first. And those other things are just that. They're other things. They do make up a part of us, but we are human first. And so that's actually something that I've also struggled with, because for example, like I've never been the type of person to greet anybody as like they were my friend. But when I really think about it, you know, the reason I am that way, it's a form of protection. I don't treat every single person like they're my best friend because I don't really know them, and I'm like afraid that they are going to hurt me, right? Or that maybe I'll really like them and then they'll leave. So that treatment of others in maybe a very cold way at first is a form of defense. And so it is an interesting idea to treat others like they're your friend already, right? To treat friends like their family already, and to give that trust to people unless proven otherwise. Same thing, like even if you meet somebody that isn't an American, but to not treat them like a foreigner, right? Because even though, like, for example, like immigrants, they come into this country, like I was an immigrant, you know, I would want someone to treat me like a human first and an immigrant second, right? Like, you should always treat someone like they're your equal, they're human first. Everything else is just everything else. So I really love that principle. I think it is very, very forgotten, especially today with all the things going on in our world. I think we can get very caught up in those labels: Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, immigrant, American. We can get very caught up in the labels and the classifications of who we are, but we all need to remember that first thing, and it's that we are human first. Principle number 8, our personal development is bound in cooperation with others. So Stoics believe that we were made by nature for the purpose of working with others. We were all made for cooperation. And I know this one is a hard one, okay? Like, I work at a corporate job 9 to 5, and when you are working with people, there will always be conflict because we have differing opinions, we have different desires, we have different egos. It is difficult. But I will say that finding and trying to find a way to work with others and cooperate, beautiful things can come of that. Because when you are able to work with other people, they can bring you different perspectives and just ideas that you maybe never would have had, and you can collaborate and create something new and different. It's like the old saying of two minds are better than one. And although I know it is super challenging to try and work with other people, I think that that is definitely a skill that will help us all grow professionally in our relationships and just every aspects of our life. That if you can learn to work with other people, that is a huge benefit to both you and just to the world in general. Okay, last principle, persist and resist. So, Stoics believed that it is all about progress, not perfection. So, no matter your stature or where you are in life, the Stoics believe that there is always deeper work going on. So, the setbacks and obstacles that we go through is how we improve ourselves. So, making better decisions every time. The Stoics believe that the journey never ends, but the progress we make daily brings us closer to stability and peace and benefits those around us. And that is a really, really, really amazing principle, because for a long time, I was very caught up in being perfect and needing to know everything about everything to take that next step. Or feeling like, oh, I'm not going to be ready until I know this and this and this. And it's like, it's almost leaning into the idea that like we're not perfect, like we're all on this journey of growing, and we might be in different stages than other people, right? And success or achievement will come at different stages for everyone else, but almost like letting go of that end goal and really just focusing on the journey. And I think for me that's been a very tough thing to overcome, is that I want what I'm doing at this current moment to be absolutely perfect. And the more that I lean into the fact that I myself am growing, and that I myself, every single day, I'm going to learn something new and do something better, it is so freeing once you can get into that mindset that you don't have to be perfect. You just have to get up the next day and try again. Because the more that you get up and you try and you keep pushing, you're going to keep learning and you're going to keep growing. And that it's not about perfection. Like, no one is ever going to be perfect. And the people that really get ahead and the people that really make a name for themselves are the people that let go of that, like, oh, I'm going to be famous or I'm going to do this. It's like, no, the people who really make it and the people who really create something beautiful are the people that are just obsessed with the journey, and they're in it and they're enjoying every step of the way. And it's almost like an obsession, right? Like you have to do this thing every single day because you want to have better. It's that obsession with getting better and learning more. And I think it takes an immense amount of courage to keep working at your craft and keep getting up every single day and pushing through and trying to get better despite obstacles, despite people telling you no. But it's the courage to still get up the next day and do it again. So for me, these principles of Stoicism have really helped me let go of trying to find happiness in external and materialistic things, but to find happiness by falling in love with the journey of my pursuits. Now, when I create content, when I create ideas for this podcast, when I do anything, I think about, who am I helping when I'm doing this? And is this in line with my virtues and my passions and with the deeper individual of who I am? Okay, guys, that's it for today's episode. I'd love to know, out of all the principles that I talked about today, which one you related to the most. And I just want to mention to you guys that as women in this world, it is up to us to become the high value, thoughtful, intuitive, hardworking beings that we are supposed to be. I'm so excited for all of the concepts that we're going to discuss in this series, Philosophy for the Girls. So make sure you stay tuned. And also, if you have concepts or philosophies that you've heard about and you want to learn more about, please DM them, send them to me, tag us on Instagram and TikTok so that we can make sure we bring it up in the next episode. Also, stay tuned because we are going to have some incredible interviews of women. I am so excited for the next two guests that we have coming up on this podcast. You're going to absolutely love them. So make sure you stay tuned. If you're enjoying the advice and the tips that we're giving you on your Vibe Tribe podcast, please take a second to share this episode on your TikTok, on your IGs, and share it with your network because it really does help us grow. And as always, if you do anything, do it with love, passion, and conviction. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.